This is Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate, the podcast where we cover home buying, home selling, home improvement tips and ideas, market trends and developments, and investing in real estate. If you own real estate in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area, or want to own real estate here, then you're in the right place. Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate is hosted by Blake Watson, a real estate agent and investor in Tennessee and Georgia.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate. I'm Blake Watson with Epic Realty. And when someone inherits real estate, it often happens during a time of loss, stress, and certainly emotional overload. And for many people, inheriting a home isn't something they planned for, and it can quickly raise a lot of questions. What do I actually own? Do I owe taxes? Can I sell this house right away? And what happens if there are multiple heirs involved? And today I want to walk through what inheriting real estate really means, specifically here in Tennessee and Georgia, and help you understand the concerns you may face and the steps you should take if you decide selling the property is the right move for you. So let's get started. The first thing to understand is what it legally means to inherit property. In most cases, inheriting real estate involves a legal process called probate. And probate is the court-supervised process that confirms a person's death, it validates their will if one exists, and it formally transfers ownership of assets, and that includes real estate, to the heirs. In both Tennessee and Georgia, if the property was solely in the deceased person's name and not held in a trust or jointly with rights of survivorship, probate is usually required. And that means even if the will clearly states that the house goes to you, the court still has to approve the transfer before you truly own it and are able to take any action like selling it or renting it out or getting a loan on it. Probate timelines vary, but in many cases, you're looking at anywhere from 6 months to a year, sometimes longer if the estate is complicated or disputed. Now, I've seen them get property transferred to the heirs in 6 weeks or so, but it often takes a good bit longer to sort out everything. Now, if there is no will, then that's called dying intestate. State law will determine who inherits the property. And typically, a surviving spouse and children are first in line, followed by other relatives if there's no immediate family. And the court will appoint an executor or a personal representative to manage the estate, pay the debts, and eventually distribute assets. And this personal representative or executor is often a surviving spouse or a family member. And until probate is complete or the court grants authority to sell, heirs often cannot legally sell the property even if everyone agrees that they want to sell it. So you have to get through this court process. One of the biggest worries that people have when they inherit real estate is taxes. And this is where there's often a lot of confusion. The good news is that Tennessee and Georgia are both very favorable states when it comes to inheritance. Neither state currently has a state inheritance tax, and neither has a state-level estate tax. That means most heirs in Tennessee and Georgia will not owe the state anything simply by inheriting the property. This surprises a lot of people, and it's an important myth to clear up early, so that's why I wanted to put that out there. Now, where taxes can come into play is at the federal level, but even then, only a small percentage of estates are affected. Federal estate tax only applies if the total value of the estate exceeds a very high exemption amount, which is well into the millions of dollars. In fact, in 2026, the federal estate tax exemption for 2026 is $15 million per individual. And with proper tax planning, it can be a combined exemption of $30 million for a married couple. And those are big numbers, so most families never come close to that threshold. But you may reach it quicker than you think if a large family farm or a business is involved. But still, for the vast majority of heirs listening today, federal estate tax will not apply at all. So that's some good news. The tax issue that matters the most for people who sell inherited property is capital gains tax. And this is where something called a stepped-up basis becomes incredibly important. When you inherit real estate, your tax basis is not what the original owner paid for the property decades ago. Instead, your basis is stepped up to the fair market value of the property as of the date of the owner's death. This can significantly reduce or even eliminate capital gains tax if you sell the property relatively soon after you inherit it. Now, here's a simple example, kind of lets you see how this plays out in real life. Let's say your parents bought a house in the 1980s and they paid $100,000 for it. And at the time of their passing, the home is worth $400,000. So that is from $400,000 today back to when they bought it at $100,000. That's a $300,000 gain in value. But if you sell it shortly after you've inherited it for about that same amount, the $400,000, there may be little to no taxable gain. And even if the property appreciates after you inherit it, you're only taxed on the increase from the date of death forward, not on those decades of appreciation. This is one of the most important financial benefits that heirs should understand before making any decisions. Now, if the inherited property was a rental property, then that stepped-up basis also resets the clock to zero for depreciation that may have been taken by the original owner. So again, you inherit the property at the market value upon the person's death. So the death date is when you would actually set the valuation. And I advise you to speak with your tax professional to see how the estate tax exemptions and the stepped-up basis may benefit you and reduce taxes to virtually nothing, possibly, for inheriting the property. So that's a good reason to speak with your tax professional. Now, beyond taxes, there are ongoing costs and responsibilities that will begin almost immediately after inheritance. We call those holding costs for the property. And that's because property taxes don't stop just because a home is in probate, and someone needs to make sure those property taxes are still paid to avoid any penalties or potentially liens if they went underpaid for a while. The same goes for homeowners insurance, utilities, and basic maintenance. These all need to continue to be current with their payments. And if the property sits vacant, there may also be higher insurance premiums or risks of vandalism or damage. In most counties, there are also deed recording fees or transfer-related costs once that ownership officially changes hands. Now, these aren't usually large expenses, but they do add up and should be part of your decision-making process. Once the initial legal and tax picture is clearer, the next step is getting organized. One of the most important early tasks is making sure the title to the property will be clear. If probate is required, that process needs to be handled correctly before a sale can move forward. Title issues to a property are one of the most common reasons inherited property sales get delayed or they fall apart. Ordering an appraisal around the time of inheritance can also be extremely helpful, not only for setting expectations on the value of the property, but for documenting the stepped-up basis for tax purposes. At this point, heirs generally face a big decision. What do you actually want to do with the property? For some, selling makes the most sense, especially if the home is in another city or state, or maybe it needs repairs or carries some emotional weight. Others may choose to keep the property as a rental or even move into it themselves. There's no one-size-fits-all that answers this. It's okay to take some time to decide. As long as ongoing expenses are being handled responsibly, it's okay to take a little time. And if selling is the chosen path for the real estate, timing becomes the next question. There's generally no legal deadline that forces you to sell the inherited property immediately after probate. And in some cases, waiting can make sense depending on market conditions or family circumstances. However, the longer you hold the property, there certainly is an ongoing expense to holding it, and the more potential there is for capital gains if the value increases. Now, capital gains are not a bad thing, but you do pay tax on capital gains. So selling sooner often simplifies things, especially if you have multiple heirs that are involved. Selling inherited property also comes with paperwork and coordination. Common documents that you'll need include the death certificates, probate court orders, proof that the property taxes are current, and, of course, standard seller disclosures. If there are multiple heirs, Everyone typically must agree to the sale or at least authorize one person to act on behalf of the group. Disagreements among heirs are one of the most common challenges in inherited property situations, and they can quickly turn a straightforward sale into a long and stressful process. Now I want to take just a moment and speak to you if you own property and are thinking about how multiple heirs may handle your property after your death. I would recommend you speak to them about how you see things working out and how the property should be divided or sold and divided. A professional estate planner and an attorney can be invaluable in working through the potential challenges. The last thing you want is for your heirs to end up fighting about the path forward. Strong disagreements and even lawsuits are not uncommon in families that have significant inheritance. So think about this and take steps now to assure that your estate can be a blessing to your heirs and not drive them further apart. Now, let's get back to addressing heirs who have inherited property. Heirs need to decide how they want to sell. Some choose a traditional real estate listing to maximize the value, especially if the property is in good condition. If it's good move-in ready condition, well, great. Sell it for retail price. Others will opt for an as-is sale to an investor or a cash buyer if there's repairs, clean out, or time constraints. If those are big concerns, if you need to get it sold quickly, that could be your answer, is a cash sale. Of course, each option has trade-offs, and understanding those clearly can prevent regret later. And as a realtor and investor myself, I happen to be in the position to make cash offers on inherited properties, as well as list them on the MLS to sell at retail price. So I can help you make an informed decision as to how best to sell your property. Now, there are also common pitfalls that heirs should watch out for. Probate delays, unresolved liens, unpaid mortgages, and back taxes. These all have to be addressed before a sale can close. Properties that have been vacant for long periods may also have title issues, boundary disputes, or family members or friends who are storing items there or possibly even living in the property unauthorized. And these situations might sound kind of crazy, but they aren't rare at all. And they are another reason professional guidance can be invaluable. Which brings us to an important point, knowing when to bring in help. Inherited property sits at the intersection of law, taxes, and real estate, and very few people are experts in all three. A probate or estate attorney can help navigate the legal process, certainly. A CPA can provide tax guidance specific to your situation, and a real estate agent experienced with inherited property can help you understand value, your selling options, and local market conditions. So surrounding yourself with the right professionals often saves time, money, and stress in the long run. Inheriting real estate can feel overwhelming, no doubt about it. But with the right information and support, it doesn't have to be. Understanding the legal process, the tax implications, and your options puts you back in control and allows you to make decisions that are right for you and your family. If you've inherited property in the Chattanooga area or Northwest Georgia, and you have questions about what comes next, I'm happy to help. My name is Blake Watson, and you can reach me at 423-315-1815. You can visit my website at athomechattanooga.com, or you can connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I'm Blake Watson on both of those platforms. And then on Instagram, you'll find me as Rock and Roll Blake. I am an agent with Epic Realty, and our brokerage phone is 888-893-3537. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate.